Hello everybody, Andy here again. Right, this is a response to a guy called Kurt344, and he did a video recently, actually it was getting on for a month ago now, about the Cold War, and what he wanted was to hear people's responses, people's experiences of the Cold War, which obviously I suppose started in the 1950s and went up to the fall of the Berlin Wall in sort of 1990, 1991, and the sort of the change in the whole communist bloc, as we used to call it, behind the old Iron Curtain. But from my opinion, obviously I'm over here in the UK, and a lot of the, I've watched quite a few of the responses as well, and they're obviously based around America and their own experiences, and they had sort of drills in school. They had public information films telling them to duck and cover under them, having drills to sort of hide under their desks and things like this in case of a nuclear attack. They must have much stronger desks over there, that's all I can say, because I can't imagine any school desks that I ever sat behind being able to withstand the impact of a nuclear explosion. But there you go, I suppose anything's better than nothing. I know they teach people to do that for earthquakes, etc. as well, so anything's better than nothing, I suppose. But over here in the UK, I don't recall ever having anything like that. Obviously we were, I suppose in some ways, right in the firing line. The enemy, I suppose if you wanted to call it that, was the sort of the communist bloc, as I said, all those sneaky people over there behind the Iron Curtain, and Russia in particular, obviously. We were, as I said, right in the firing line, and I think over here there was a sort of a certain sort of fatalism, I suppose, that if anything was to happen, that would be our loss. I said I was born in 1958, so I had a fair idea of it throughout the sort of late 60s, I suppose. I can just about remember my parents talking about the Cuba incident. I think it was at 1962 with the Bay of Pigs and all that, and most people seem to think that was the time when the world certainly came the closest to a nuclear war that we've ever really had, I think. And I think Khrushchev sent a load of nuclear ships or weapons over towards Cuba, and luckily he pulled back, and so the world sort of turned back from the brink. I hope my historical facts are right, but anyway, I vaguely remember that, and I think I remember my parents talking about that, but probably a bit young. But from my own point of view, sort of the late 70s and 80s especially, I think from over here it took a big turn, the threat, I suppose, when two particular politicians came to the fore. We had Margaret Thatcher over here in the UK, was elected in 1979, and of course over there in the US you had President Reagan, and both of those were what you would call sort of hawks, I suppose, and they were very keen on promoting, isn't the right word, but it's the only word I can think of at the moment, promoting the threat of communism and all the people from behind the Iron Curtain, the threat of nuclear war. And so we build up great arsenals of cruise missiles, nuclear submarines, and we sort of spent a lot of money on sort of rearming ourselves, or further arming ourselves, should we say. And I felt a lot more of a threat at that particular time when we had those particular politicians in power, and I'm sure other people feel the same. Maybe others don't, I don't know. And that seemed to go on, and it only seemed to die down when President Gorbachev came into power over there in Russia, and things started to change slightly, and they had sort of talks. I seem to remember having talks in Iceland, and we had strategic arms limitation treaties and things like that coming along, and we started to sort of fall back a little bit. But that sort of late 70s, early 80s was a time that I certainly remember. Whether it was a real threat, I don't know, because I think some people have actually pointed out, and I do subscribe to the view to a degree, that I think that sometimes these things are made more threats made worse, should we say, by some politicians, because it's in their interest to actually talk it up a little bit. I know people will disagree with that, but it does serve a purpose, because then it makes them look better, makes them look stronger, that they're more caring, and that's a very cynical point of view, but I can be a cynical git at times. But a lot of money was spent on nuclear arms, which could have been spent a lot better on other things. That's a personal opinion, and that's still going on today. I may mention that later, but that's something that I do think, okay, the threat was there. I have no doubt the threat was there. But it just becomes a sort of a snowball effect. We build more or buy more weapons, so the other side does the same, and it just keeps going on and on. We all had thousands of weapons each, which could destroy all of our countries several times over. And that's another point that I'd like to make, is that I always remember the expression mutually assured destruction, which holds firm today as it did then. And any country that launched a nuclear strike then or today knows that if they do that, they will be obliterated. which brings us up to the present day, and there's a lot of parallels between what happens in the world today and what happened in the world then. And I think the mutually assured destruction point of view possibly held us back. I suppose it might have actually stopped something happening. I suppose we'll never know, and a bit later on, maybe when all the facts do come out, we'll find out exactly how close we did come. I think we did come very close, as I said, with the Kennedy and Khrushchev era, the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis and that. But since then, I'm not sure that we actually came that close at all. So that's something I remember. But over here in the UK, in the early 80s, we had a big movement because of the US had their US Air Force bases over here, and they were housing cruise missiles. Their planes were housing cruise missiles, and that was a very big topic of conversation. We had people at some of the Air Force bases, Greenham Common, which I think is in Berkshire. We had sort of women out there campaigning, and they were there for years sort of campaigning against having essentially American weapons on our soil and making us a target, which what it did. And I must admit, I subscribed to that. CND, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, a very big, certainly had a very big sort of appeal in the early 80s, and I actually joined them for a while because I felt strongly about that. I do think that we spend too much money. Incidentally, over here in the UK, we're having a bit of a debate at the moment, but the government are talking about updating our nuclear deterrent, our Trident cruise nuclear missiles. I think they're cruise missiles, and that's going to cost £25 billion, which equates to getting on for $50 billion. Now that is a lot of money. Now personally, I don't agree with that. I think we can spend that money far better somewhere else. There's far more things that we could spend it on. Nowadays, I don't think the nuclear threat is as much as what it was. We've all got weapons. We're not going to get rid of all of our weapons. We've still got weapons. We've got people like Iran and everyone else wanting to build weapons. They know, as I said, and one point I'll make straight away is why shouldn't they have weapons if we've got them? Why shouldn't they have them? You know, I mean, okay. It's not palatable, it's something we don't want to happen. Nobody wants supposedly rogue states to have these weapons, but they've got just as much right as anybody else. We've had them for years now. Why should we dictate to them what they have? I don't like them to have them. I'd rather nobody had any, but that's probably a completely unrealistic proposition. But anyway, so I said the parallels between now and then are going on, but they're my things. One thing, you did mention a film, The Day After, which I do remember watching myself, but because it was an American viewpoint, maybe we didn't take it quite so seriously over here. I remember it being a fairly powerful film, but I think most of the films that I saw at that time I felt were sort of slightly unrealistic. We always had these survivors and people. There aren't many survivors in a nuclear war. Just look at the explosions in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There were a few, but there weren't very many, and I think we're living in cloud cuckoo land if we think we can sort of win through and hide behind desks and things like that. Totally unrealistic. But the film that did have the most effect on me, it wasn't such a serious film, but it had this very serious subject matter, was a film called War Games, and that was anybody who didn't watch the film, and it's still valid nowadays. I think it was about a child playing on his computer, and he managed to hack into the command and control center of the US missiles or something like that, and he managed to start, he thought he was playing a game, but he actually started a war or potentially started a war by hacking into the computer unknowingly and starting a war. And I found that far more frightening, that something like this could happen by accident, and I think that is something that could happen now. A rumour goes round, something starts up, and it all starts by accident rather than by design, if you want to call it that. But anyway, that's my viewpoint. It's a very good idea. I like your idea of the history. I think this type of thing, people talking about their own experiences and sharing their own personal histories, real people sharing their own histories rather than maybe the politicians and people like that, is exactly what YouTube and all these other video sites are so well there for. They're the great idea, and this is what they're all about, in my opinion. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope this video hasn't been too long. They're my opinions, but to any one of my subscribers, I urge you to watch Kurt344's video about the Cold War and some of the responses as well. Very good. The one I originally got onto was Ken RG's one. Quite amusing. Anyway, thanks for your time. I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.